They sold her like livestock. No ceremony, no tears, just a signature on parchment that traded Lila Hart to the coldest man in the kingdom. Her own father wouldn't meet her eyes. Her sister smiled. And the Duke? He looked at her once, with eyes like winter frost, and said 6 words that sealed her fate. She'll do. I want silence. But what they didn't know, what no one saw coming, was that the girl they'd thrown away had just run out of patience with being nothing. If you want to see how the invisible girl burns down everything that tried to erase her, stay until the very end. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. The morning they sold Lila Hart, it rained. Not the romantic kind of rain that poets write about. The kind that turns dirt roads into rivers of mud and makes everything smell like rust and rot. Lila stood in the foyer of Hart Manor, a single trunk at her feet, while her family pretended she didn't exist. Her mother fussed over Delphine's hair. Her father reviewed documents in his study. And Delphine, beautiful, golden Delphine, sat in the drawing room eating candied oranges, her laughter ringing through the house like bells. No one said goodbye. Lila had 23 years of practice being invisible, but today the silence felt different, sharper, like a blade she'd finally learned to hold. You'll want to keep your head down. Her mother's voice cut through the quiet, flat, and practical. She didn't even turn around. The Duke has specific expectations. Silence, Lila said. I know. Her mother's hand stilled in Delphine's curls for just a moment. Then you understand. This is a mercy, Lila. He could have refused you entirely. Mercy. The word tasted like poison. For 23 years, Lila had been the spare daughter, the plain one, the quiet one, the one who existed only to make Delphine shine brighter by comparison. When suitors came, they looked past Lila like she was furniture. When her father hosted dinners, she sat at the far end of the table and counted the minutes until she could disappear. And she'd accepted it, believed it even, that some people were born to be seen and others were born to fade. But 3 weeks ago, everything changed. 3 weeks ago, Lord Ashton came to call. He was a minor lord with a comfortable estate, decent prospects, and a laugh that reminded Lila of wind chimes. He'd spoken to her, actually spoken to her, about books and gardens and the way morning light hit the east windows. For one perfect afternoon, Lila had felt like she existed. Then Delphine walked into the room. It took exactly 4 minutes for Lord Ashton to forget Lila's name. By the end of the evening, he was composing poetry about Delphine's eyes. Within a week, he'd asked for her hand. Lila had congratulated them, had smiled while something inside her cracked clean through. And that night, she'd heard them. Her parents, in her father's study, voices low, but not low enough. We need to do something with Lila, her mother had said. She's 23, no prospects, no dowry worth mentioning. She's becoming an embarrassment. The Duke, her father replied. Blackmore. He's looking for a wife. A pause. Then her mother's laugh, sharp, disbelieving. Rowan Blackmore. The madman who lives in that tomb? He hasn't been seen in society for 5 years. Exactly. He wants a wife who won't bother him, won't talk, won't make demands. A decoration. And you think he'd take Lila? He won't care what she looks like. He just wants someone quiet to fulfill the legal requirement. His solicitor made it very clear. Any woman who can keep silent and stay out of his way. Her mother had hummed thoughtfully. It would solve the problem, and Delphine's wedding is in 3 months. It would look better if Lila were settled. Settled, like arranging furniture. I'll write to his solicitor tomorrow, her father had said. Lila had stood outside that door, her hand pressed against the wood, and felt something inside her die. Or maybe it was being born. She couldn't tell the difference anymore. 2 days later, the offer came back. Accepted. No courtship. No meeting. Just a contract and a date. They were selling her to a man who wanted silence, because even her own family couldn't stand her existence. Now standing in the foyer with rain drumming against the windows, Lila looked at her mother's back and made a choice. I want to say goodbye to Delphine, she said. Her mother waved a hand. Make it quick. The carriage is waiting. Lila walked into the drawing room. Delphine looked up from her oranges, surprised. They'd barely spoken since the engagement to Lord Ashton. Delphine had been too busy planning her wedding, and Lila had been too busy trying not to shatter. "You're leaving," Delphine said. Not a question. "Yes." "To marry the Mad Duke." Delphine popped another piece of orange into her mouth. "Mother says his manner is falling apart, that he never leaves, that he might be dangerous." "So I've heard. Aren't you frightened?" Lila looked at her sister, at the girl who'd had everything handed to her since birth, who'd never once had to wonder if she mattered, and felt that new, sharp thing inside her turn. "Frightened of what?" Lila asked quietly. "Being invisible? Being unwanted? I've had 23 years of practice, Delphine. At least the Duke is honest about it." Delphine's eyes widened slightly. Lila stepped closer. "You know what's funny? I actually liked Lord Ashton. For one afternoon I thought maybe someone could see me. But then you walked in, and I disappeared, like always." "Lila, I used to think it was my fault," Lila continued, her voice soft but cutting. "That I wasn't pretty enough, charming enough of anything. But I finally understand it was never about me. It was about you. You need someone to stand next to, someone to be better than. And I'm done being that person." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Lila laughed, and it sounded wrong coming from her throat, foreign. "You're marrying a man who doesn't know I exist, even though he spent an entire afternoon talking to me. Mother's selling me to a stranger because I'm an embarrassment. Father won't even look at me. And you want to talk about fair?" Delphine set down her oranges, her face pale. "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing," Lila said. "I just wanted you to know. I'm done. Done fading. Done shrinking. Done being the spare daughter who exists just to make you look better. Whatever happens in that manner, however this ends, I will not be invisible anymore." She turned and walked out before Delphine could respond. Her mother was waiting in the foyer, impatient. "The carriage, Lila. Now." Lila picked up her trunk, one trunk for an entire life, and walked out into the rain. The carriage was black, pulled by 4 black horses, and looked like something that should be carrying the dead. The driver helped her inside without speaking, and then they were moving, leaving Hart Manor behind. Lila pressed her face to the window and watched her home disappear into the gray morning. She didn't cry. The estate of Duke Rowan Blackmore lay 3 hours north, through forests that grew darker and roads that narrowed to barely more than paths. Lila watched the landscape change, from cultivated farms to wild woods, from sunshine to shadow. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. No birdsong, no wind, just the steady rhythm of hooves and wheels and rain. When the manor finally appeared through the trees, Lila's breath caught. It was massive. 3 stories of gray stone, with towers that clawed at the sky and windows that looked like empty eyes. Parts of it were clearly crumbling. Ivy covered the east wing like a shroud. The gardens were overgrown, wild, choked with weeds. It looked like a place where hope went to die. The carriage stopped at the main entrance. The driver opened the door, helped her out, and left her trunk on the steps without a word. Then he climbed back onto his seat and drove away. Just like that, she was alone. Lila stood in the rain, staring at the massive oak door, and felt that sharp thing inside her harden into resolve. She'd spent her entire life being what other people wanted: quiet, forgettable, convenient. If this was where that path led, she might as well walk it on her own terms. She raised her hand and knocked. The sound echoed inside like thunder. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened. The man standing there wasn't a servant. Lila knew that immediately. He wore dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. No coat, no cravat. His hair was black and needed cutting. His face was all sharp angles and shadows, and his eyes, dark gray like storm clouds, looked right through her. "Miss Hart," he said. His voice was deep, rough, like he didn't use it much. "Duke Blackmore," she replied. They stared at each other. He was younger than she'd expected, 30 at most, and not at all what she'd pictured. She'd imagined someone older, softer, broken by grief. But there was nothing soft about this man. He looked like he was carved from the same stone as his manner, hard, cold, unyielding. "You're wet," he said finally. "It's raining." "So I see." He stepped back. "Come in." Lila picked up her trunk and walked inside. The entrance hall was cavernous and dark, lit only by a few candles. The floor was marble, cracked in places. The walls were lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Everything smelled like dust and old smoke. Rowan closed the door behind her, and the sound boomed through the space like a cell door slamming shut. "There's no staff," he said, not looking at her. "I have a woman who comes twice a week to clean and bring supplies, but otherwise, it's just us." "I understand." "Your rooms are on the second floor, east wing. You'll take your meals in your chambers. I take mine in the study. We won't see each other unless absolutely necessary." Lila set down her trunk. "Is that all?" He turned to look at her then, really look at her, and something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or suspicion. "I was told you understood the terms," he said carefully. "I do. A silent wife for a silent house. No conversation, no demands, no inconvenience." "Exactly. And what do I get in exchange?" His eyebrows rose slightly. "You get to be a duchess. You get this house, my name, financial security." "I get to be invisible in a bigger cage," Lila interrupted. The words hung between them like smoke. Rowan's expression darkened. "If you're having second thoughts—" "I'm not," Lila said quickly. "I'm just clarifying the terms. You want a wife who doesn't exist. I want a life that isn't under my family's control. We both get what we want." He studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrow. "You're not what I expected." "Neither are you." "What did you expect?" "A monster," Lila said honestly. "Or a broken man, maybe both." "And what do you see?" She looked at him. At the hard set of his jaw, the shadows under his eyes, the way he held himself like he was bracing for a blow. "Someone who wants to be left alone," she said quietly. Something in his face shifted. Not softness exactly, but recognition. "Then we understand each other," he said. "We do." He picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing. "I'll show you to your rooms." She followed him up the grand staircase, through corridors lined with more portraits and closed doors. Everything was dark, cold, abandoned, like the house itself was holding its breath. He stopped at a door near the end of the east wing and pushed it open. The room beyond was large but sparse. A bed, a wardrobe, a desk by the window. Dust motes danced in the gray light. "There's a washroom through that door," Rowan said, setting her trunk down. "If you need anything, leave a note on the hall table downstairs. I'll see it's taken care of." "A note," Lila repeated. "Not a conversation." "Correct." She turned to face him. "And if there's an emergency?" "There won't be." "But if there is, there won't be," he said again, harder this time. "I've lived here alone for 5 years, Miss Hart. I don't need saving, I don't need company, and I sure as hell don't need questions." The words should have stung, but Lila just felt tired. "Good," she said, "because I didn't come here to save you. I came here to escape." His eyes flashed with something, anger maybe, or respect. "Then we'll get along fine." He turned to leave. "Duke Blackmore," Lila called. He stopped but didn't turn around. "Why did you agree to this? You could have anyone. Why marry a stranger you plan to ignore?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, without turning, he said, "Because the law requires I marry, and I prefer strangers to people who think they know me." Then he walked out and closed the door behind him. Lila stood alone in the cold room, listening to his footsteps fade down the corridor. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the wild, overgrown gardens below. This was her life now. A ghost in a tomb, married to a man who wanted her silent. But as she stood there watching the rain fall on the broken statues and tangled paths, Lila made herself a promise. She'd been invisible her whole life. She'd been the spare, the disappointment, the girl no one saw. But she was done fading. If Rowan Blackmore wanted silence, she'd give him silence, but on her terms, in her way. And maybe, just maybe, she'd figure out why a duke who had everything would choose to live like this, like he was punishing himself, like he was waiting to disappear. The first week was exactly what Rowan promised, silence. Lila ate in her room. She walked the corridors alone. She explored the parts of the house that weren't locked or falling apart. The library was massive but neglected, books thick with dust. The ballroom was empty, the chandeliers covered in sheets. The music room held a piano that hadn't been tuned in years. Everything felt frozen, like the house had stopped breathing the day Rowan locked himself inside. She saw him twice, once in the hallway, where he nodded and kept walking, and once through a window standing in the rain in the garden, staring at nothing. Both times, he looked like he was somewhere else entirely. Lila left him alone. She'd meant what she said. She hadn't come here to fix him. But she watched. She noticed. The way he kept every door closed. The way he moved through the house like a ghost himself. The way he never, ever looked at the West Wing. On the 8th day, Lila woke to screaming. She bolted upright in bed, heart pounding, and listened. It came again. A raw, broken sound from somewhere below her, wordless and terrible. She grabbed her robe and ran into the hallway. The screaming stopped as suddenly as it started, leaving only silence. Lila stood frozen, listening. Then she heard it, ragged breathing, footsteps, a door slamming. She knew she should go back to her room, knew she should follow the rules. But that scream, it hadn't sounded like anger. It sounded like pain. She followed the sound down the stairs, through the dark corridors, until she found herself standing outside the study. Light spilled from under the door. Lila raised her hand to knock, then stopped. What was she doing? Rowan had made the rules clear, no questions, no interference. But that scream, she knocked anyway. Go away. His voice was rough, broken. Are you hurt? I said go away. Lila pressed her palm against the door. I heard you scream. Silence. Then, it's none of your concern. You're right, Lila said. It's not. But I'm asking anyway. She heard movement inside, footsteps, something hitting the floor. Then the door opened. Rowan stood there, and for the first time Lila saw him unguarded. His shirt was soaked with sweat. His hair stuck to his forehead. His eyes were red-rimmed and wild, like he'd been somewhere terrible and just clawed his way back. Nightmares, he said flatly. I have nightmares. Now you know. Go back to bed. But Lila didn't move. She looked past him into the study, at the overturned chair, the scattered papers, the half-empty bottle of whiskey. How often? She asked quietly. His jaw tightened. What part of go away is unclear? How often, Rowan? The use of his name made him flinch. Every night, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Every single night for 5 years. Lila's throat tightened. What do you dream about? Fire, he said. I dream about fire. Then he stepped back and closed the door in her face. Lila stood there for a long moment, staring at the wood. Then she went back to her room. But she didn't sleep, because now she knew Rowan Blackmore wasn't just a man who wanted to be alone. He was a man being haunted. And whether he liked it or not, Lila was done pretending she didn't see it. The morning after the screaming, Lila found the locked door. She'd been exploring the West Wing, the one Rowan never entered, the one that felt colder than the rest of the house. Most of the rooms were empty or shrouded in dust sheets, but at the end of the corridor, past the faded tapestries and broken sconces, stood a door different from all the others. Heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands, and locked with 3 separate bolts. Lila stood before it, hand hovering over the wood, and felt the air change. It was colder here, heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath. She didn't knock, didn't try the handle, but she remembered what Rowan had said. I dream about fire. This door smelled like old smoke. That wing is off limits. Lila spun around. Rowan stood at the other end of the corridor, still in yesterday's clothes, his face drawn and pale. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. I was just exploring, he finished. I know, but not here. Never here. He walked toward her, each step deliberate, and Lila saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not anger, fear. What's behind this door? She asked. Nothing that concerns you. Everything in this house concerns me now. I live here. You exist here, Rowan corrected, his voice sharp. There's a difference. He was close now, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched at his sides, close enough to see that he was barely holding himself together. "You screamed for 20 minutes last night," Lila said quietly. "I counted." His face went white. "You should have covered your ears." "I'm not afraid of your nightmares, Rowan." "Then you're a fool." "Maybe," Lila said, "but I'm a fool who's not going anywhere. So you can either tell me what's behind that door, or I can spend every day wondering about it. Your choice." They stared at each other, the silence stretching thin as wire. Finally, Rowan exhaled, a long, defeated sound. "Her rooms," he said. "Charlotte's rooms." "Charlotte?" "My fiancée." The word came out like broken glass. "The woman who died because of me." Lila's breath caught. She'd heard rumors, of course, whispers about the Duke who'd lost his betrothed in a fire, who'd locked himself away in grief. But she'd never heard her name. "What happened?" Lila asked. Rowan turned away from her, staring at the locked door like it might open and swallow him whole. 5 years ago, we were hosting a ball. Charlotte loved parties, loved being surrounded by people. I was in the study, avoiding the crowds like always, when someone came running. Fire in the west wing, fast, uncontrollable, spreading through the old wood like it was hungry. His voice was flat, emotionless, but his hands shook. I ran. Everyone ran. But Charlotte had gone upstairs to change her dress, and by the time I reached her rooms, the hallway was already burning. I tried to get to her. He stopped, his jaw working. "They pulled me back," he continued. 3 men, holding me down while I screamed her name. And then the ceiling collapsed, and she was gone. Just gone. Lila felt something crack open inside her chest. "That wasn't your fault." Rowan laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Wasn't it? I was the one who insisted on this manor, even though everyone said it was falling apart. I was the one who was too cheap to replace the old wiring, the rotting wood. I was the one who left her alone while I hid in my study like a coward." "You didn't start the fire." "I might as well have." He finally turned to look at her, and his eyes were hollow. "That's why I wanted this marriage, Miss Hart. A transaction. No feelings, no attachment, no risk, because everything I touch turns to ash." The words hung between them like smoke. Lila should have walked away, should have gone back to her room, back to the safety of silence. Instead, she said, "Show me." Rowan blinked. "What?" "Show me her rooms. Show me what you're so afraid of." "Absolutely not. You dream about fire every night," Lila interrupted. "You lock yourself in this tomb and punish yourself for something that wasn't your fault. Maybe if you actually faced it instead of hiding from it." "You don't know what you're asking." "Then explain it to me." "No." "Rowan, I said no." His voice echoed through the corridor, harsh and final. "You want to live here? Fine. You want your freedom from your family? You have it. But you don't get to psychoanalyze me. You don't get to play savior, and you sure as hell don't get to open doors that should stay closed." He pushed past her and stalked down the corridor, his footsteps like thunder. Lila stood alone in the cold hallway, staring at the locked door. Then she made a decision. She wasn't going to save Rowan Blackmore. She'd meant what she said about that. But she was going to understand him, because understanding was different from saving. Understanding was just seeing someone clearly, and Lila had spent her whole life being unseen. She knew exactly what that felt like. Mrs. Hendricks arrived 2 days later. She was the woman who came twice a week to clean and bring supplies, a sturdy, no-nonsense type in her 50s with steel gray hair and suspicious eyes. She took one look at Lila and frowned. "So you're the new Duchess," she said, setting down her basket of supplies. "I am." Mrs. Hendricks circled Lila like she was inspecting livestock. "You're younger than I expected, plainer too." Lila had spent 23 years being called plain. The word should have lost its sting by now. It hadn't. "The Duke prefers plain," Lila said evenly. "The Duke prefers being alone," Mrs. Hendricks corrected. "But his solicitor threatened to have him declared incompetent if he didn't marry. So here you are. A legal formality and a dress. You're very direct." "I'm old. I don't have time for pretty lies." Mrs. Hendricks started unpacking supplies: bread, cheese, preserved fruit, candles. Has he spoken to you at all? Occasionally. Has he told you about the fire? Some of it. Mrs. Hendricks paused, her hand stilling on a jar of honey. Then you know he blames himself. I do. And you know he's wrong? Lila blinked. What? Mrs. Hendricks turned to face her, her expression grave. The fire wasn't an accident, girl, and it wasn't the Duke's fault, but he spent 5 years convincing himself otherwise. Lila's heart started to pound. What do you mean it wasn't an accident? I mean, fires don't start themselves in empty rooms. I mean, Charlotte's door was locked from the outside. I mean, there were things about that night that never added up, but the Duke was too broken to ask questions, and everyone else just wanted to forget. The words settled over Lila like ice water. You're saying someone started the fire deliberately? I'm saying it's possible, Mrs. Hendricks said carefully. But I'm just an old woman who brings groceries. What do I know? Who would want to hurt Charlotte? Who wouldn't? She was beautiful, rich, engaged to a duke. Half the women in society hated her out of jealousy, and half the men hated the Duke for winning her. But murder? Mrs. Hendricks shook her head. That's a serious accusation. Without proof, it's just the ravings of a servant. Does Rowan know any of this? I tried to tell him in the early days. He wouldn't listen. Said I was trying to make him feel better, to give him someone else to blame. Eventually, I stopped trying. She fixed Lila with a hard stare. But maybe you'll have better luck. You're his wife now. Maybe he'll listen to you. He barely acknowledges I exist. Then make him acknowledge you. Before Lila could respond, Mrs. Hendricks picked up her basket and headed for the door. I'll be back in 3 days. Try not to let this place swallow you whole before then. She left, and Lila stood alone in the kitchen, her mind racing. The fire wasn't an accident, if that was true. If someone had deliberately locked Charlotte in that room and set it ablaze, then Rowan had spent 5 years drowning in guilt over something he didn't cause. And the real killer was still out there. Lila's hands clenched into fists. She'd come here to escape her family, to disappear into a life of quiet isolation. But she was done disappearing. She found Rowan in the library that evening, sitting in the dark with a book he wasn't reading. Mrs. Hendricks was here today, Lila said from the doorway. I know, she left supplies. She told me something interesting. Did she? Lila stepped into the room. She said the fire might not have been an accident. The book in Rowan's hands hit the floor with a crack. Get out, he said, his voice deadly quiet. She said Charlotte's door was locked from the outside. Get out. She said there were inconsistencies, things that didn't add up. Rowan shot to his feet, and for the first time Lila saw real fury in his eyes. You've been here 2 weeks, and you think you understand? You think you can waltz in here and start making accusations about things you know nothing about? I'm not making accusations. I'm telling you what Mrs. Hendricks said. Mrs. Hendricks is a lonely old woman who reads too many novels, Rowan snarled. There was an investigation. The fire marshal ruled it an accident. Faulty wiring in old walls. That's all it was. But if there's even a chance, there isn't. The word echoed through the library like a gunshot. Rowan was breathing hard, his hands shaking. I watched her die. I watched the woman I was supposed to marry burn because I was too much of a coward to save her. That's the truth. That's all the truth there is. You couldn't have saved her. You don't know that. He slammed his fist against the bookshelf, making the volumes rattle. You don't know anything about me, about her, about what happened that night. You're just a stranger who was sold to me because your family didn't want you. You have no right to come in here and... He stopped abruptly, the color draining from his face. Lila felt the words hit like a slap, but she forced herself to stay still, to not flinch. You're right, she said quietly. I am a stranger. I was sold here because I was unwanted. But that doesn't make me blind, Rowan. I see what this guilt is doing to you. I see how it's eating you alive. And if there's even the smallest possibility that you're punishing yourself for someone else's crime, stop. His voice cracked. Please, just stop. Lila looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man on the edge of breaking. I'll stop, she said. On one condition. You don't get to make conditions. Talk to the fire marshal. Ask him about the investigation. If he confirms it was an accident, I'll never mention it again. Rowan stared at her. And if I refuse? Then I'll do it myself. You wouldn't dare. Lila stepped closer. I spent my entire life being told what I could and couldn't do. Being pushed into corners and told to stay there. I'm done with that. So yes, Rowan, I absolutely would dare. They stood inches apart, both breathing hard, the air between them crackling with tension. Then Rowan laughed, a short, bitter sound. You're insane. Probably. This isn't your fight. Maybe not, but it's the only one I've got. He studied her face, and something in his expression shifted. Why do you care? The question hung between them, honest and raw. Lila thought about lying, about giving him some noble answer about justice or truth, but she was tired of lies. Because I know what it's like to be blamed for things that aren't your fault, she said quietly. I know what it's like to be told you're the problem, the disappointment, the reason everything's wrong. And I know what it does to you when you start believing it. Rowan's jaw tightened. This is different. Is it? Lila challenged. You lock yourself in this tomb because you think you deserve it. You marry a stranger because you think you don't deserve anything real. You dream about fire every night because you've convinced yourself you're guilty. Tell me how that's different from what I did. Spending 23 years making myself smaller because I thought I deserved to disappear. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Rowan turned away, his shoulders rigid. The fire marshal's name is Gordon. He lives in the village. I'll write you a letter of introduction. Lila's heart leaped. You will? But when he confirms what I already know, that it was an accident, that I'm responsible, you'll drop this. Agreed? Agreed. He walked to the desk and pulled out paper and ink. His hand shook slightly as he wrote, but his penmanship was perfect. When he finished, he folded the letter and held it out without looking at her. Thank you, Lila said, taking it. Don't thank me yet. His voice was hollow. You're about to waste a day proving I'm exactly the monster I think I am. He left the library before she could respond. Lila stood alone with the letter in her hand, her heart pounding. She'd pushed him, challenged him, refused to back down, and he'd let her. That had to mean something. The village was an hour's walk through dense forest, and Lila set out early the next morning before she could lose her nerve. The path was overgrown and treacherous, winding through trees so thick they blocked out the sun. More than once, Lila stumbled over roots or slipped on wet leaves. Her shoes were ruined within the first 10 minutes, her dress muddy and torn by the time she finally saw buildings through the trees. The village of Thornwick was small, maybe 24 buildings clustered around a central square, a church, an inn, a blacksmith, a general store. Everything looked worn and tired, like the whole place was slowly giving up. People stared as Lila walked through the square. Women whispered behind their hands. Men watched her with suspicious eyes. She ignored them and headed straight for the inn. The innkeeper, a broad man with a permanent scowl, looked her up and down. We don't serve vagrants. I'm not a vagrant. I'm looking for Gordon, the fire marshal. His scowl deepened. What business do you have with him? Lila pulled out Rowan's letter. I'm the Duchess of Blackmore. I need to speak with him about the fire 5 years ago. The inn went dead silent. Every eye in the room turned to stare at her. The Duchess, someone whispered. The Mad Duke's wife. The spare daughter, I heard about her. Lila's face burned, but she kept her chin up. Where can I find Gordon? The innkeeper jerked his thumb toward the corner. That's him, but I doubt he'll talk to you. Gordon was a weathered man in his 60s, sitting alone with a half-empty tankard. He looked up as Lila approached, his eyes narrowing. I know who you are, he said before she could speak. And I know why you're here. Lila sat down across from him without being invited. Then you'll save me some time. I'll save you the trip back. Gordon took a long drink. The fire was an accident. Faulty wiring, old wood, bad luck. That's all it was. Mrs. Hendricks said there were inconsistencies. Mrs. Hendricks is a gossip. Gordon set down his tankard with a thud. Look, girl. I know you want to help your husband. I know he's been locked in that manner drowning in guilt. But digging up the past won't change anything. It'll just make things worse. So there were inconsistencies, Lila pressed. Gordon's face hardened. I didn't say that. You didn't deny it either. They stared at each other. Finally, Gordon sighed. Off the record? Off the record. There were questions. Charlotte's door was locked from the outside, which was odd. The fire started in her dressing room, but there was no source, no candles, no lamps, nothing. And there were traces of accelerant, though I couldn't prove it wasn't from the lamps in other rooms. Lila's pulse quickened. Did you investigate? Of course I investigated, but the Duke was half dead with grief. The family wanted it settled quickly, and I had no real evidence. Just feelings. Suspicions. What kind of suspicions? Gordon leaned forward, his voice dropping. The night of the fire, there was a man at the ball, Lord Quinton Ashford. He'd been pursuing Charlotte before she got engaged to the Duke, and he took the rejection badly. I saw him arguing with her earlier that evening, saw him storm off toward the West Wing right before the fire started. Lila's blood ran cold. And you didn't report this? I tried, but Ashford had an alibi, a dozen witnesses who said he was in the gardens when the fire broke out. And without hard evidence, I couldn't accuse a lord of murder. I'd have lost my position, maybe worse. So you just let it go? I let it go, Gordon said heavily. Because sometimes the truth doesn't matter as much as staying alive. And if you're smart, Duchess, you'll do the same. What does that mean? Gordon stood, dropping coins on the table. It means Lord Ashford is a powerful man with powerful friends. It means he's been very interested in the Duke's lands for the past 5 years, making offers, pushing for a sale. And it means if you start asking questions about that fire, you might find yourself in a different kind of danger. He walked out, leaving Lila alone at the table. Around her, the inn buzzed with whispers. She's stirring up trouble. Typical. Outsiders always think they know better. The Duke should have married someone sensible. Lila stood slowly, her legs shaking. Lord Quinton Ashford. She didn't know the name, but she knew what Gordon had just told her. Someone had killed Charlotte. Someone had locked her in that room and set it on fire. And that someone had spent the last 5 years watching Rowan destroy himself with guilt. The door to the inn burst open, and a young woman stormed in, beautiful, blonde, wearing an expensive riding habit that looked absurdly out of place in the shabby inn. Delphine. Lila's blood turned to ice. Her sister scanned the room, spotted Lila, and smiled, sharp as a knife. There you are, Delphine said sweetly. I've been looking everywhere for you. The inn went completely silent. Lila stood frozen as Delphine crossed the room, her boots clicking on the wooden floor. What are you doing here? Lila managed. Visiting my dear sister, of course. Delphine's smile never wavered. Mother and father were so worried when they heard you'd married the Mad Duke. They asked me to check on you, make sure you're settling in. It was a lie. Everything about it was a lie. The concern in her voice, the warmth in her smile, the sisterly affection. I'm fine, Lila said. You can go. Oh, but I've come all this way. Surely you won't send me away without even a cup of tea. Delphine turned to the watching crowd, her voice carrying. My poor sister, married to a man who locks himself away, living in that crumbling tomb. It must be so lonely. Whispers erupted around them. I said, I'm fine, Lila repeated, louder this time. Are you? Delphine's eyes glittered. Because I heard you've been asking questions about the fire, about poor Charlotte, how inappropriate. Lila felt the room's attention shift, felt judgment settle over her like a weight. The Duke's grief is none of your concern, someone muttered. Let the dead rest, another voice added. Delphine leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper only Lila could hear. You should know, Lord Ashford is a friend of father's, a very close friend, and when he heard the Mad Duke's new wife was causing trouble, he asked me to deliver a message. What message? Lila whispered back. Delphine's smile turned vicious. Stop asking questions. Stop digging into the past, or you'll find out exactly what happens to women who don't know their place. Then she straightened, her public smile back in place. Well, I should be going. Do give my regards to your husband, if you ever actually see him. She swept out of the inn, leaving Lila standing in the center of a hostile room. The walk back to the manor felt 3 times longer than the journey there. Lila's mind raced with everything she'd learned. Charlotte's locked door, the accelerant, Lord Ashford's argument with her, his interest in Rowan's lands, and now Delphine delivering threats on his behalf. She was right. Someone had murdered Charlotte, and they were willing to kill again to keep it quiet. By the time Lila reached the manor, the sun was setting and her whole body ached. She pushed through the front door and found Rowan waiting in the entrance hall. He looked terrible, hair disheveled, face pale, like he'd been pacing for hours. "Where the hell have you been?" he demanded. "The village. Talking to Gordon." "For 9 hours?" "I ran into complications." Rowan stepped closer, his eyes scanning her muddy dress, her torn hem, her exhausted face. "What kind of complications?" Lila opened her mouth to tell him everything, about Gordon's suspicions, about Ashford, about Delphine's threat. But the words died in her throat, because Rowan was looking at her like she mattered, like her absence had actually bothered him, like somewhere in the last 2 weeks she'd stopped being a transaction and become something else. And that was more dangerous than any threat Ashford could make. "Gordon confirmed what Mrs. Hendricks said," Lila said carefully. "There were inconsistencies, questions that were never answered." Rowan's face went white. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggest Charlotte's death wasn't an accident. The kind that point to murder." The word fell between them like a stone. Rowan grabbed her shoulders, his grip almost painful. "Who? Who would—" "Lord Quinton Ashford." Something flickered in Rowan's eyes. Recognition and rage. "Ashford," he repeated, his voice dead. Of course it was Ashford. Then he let go of her and walked away, his footsteps echoing through the empty hall. "Rowan, wait!" But he was gone, disappeared into the darkness of the manor. And Lila stood alone, realizing too late that she'd just lit a fuse she had no idea how to stop. Lila found him in Charlotte's wing. The locked door stood open, all 3 bolts thrown back, the heavy oak swinging on rusted hinges. Light from Rowan's lamp spilled into the corridor, and inside, she could hear him moving, searching, destroying. The crash of breaking glass, the thud of furniture hitting walls. Lila's heart hammered as she stepped through the doorway. The rooms beyond were exactly as they'd been left 5 years ago, or they had been, until Rowan started tearing them apart. Dresses lay scattered across the floor, ripped from the wardrobe. Drawers hung open, their contents dumped. A vanity mirror lay shattered in the corner, and in the center of it all stood Rowan, holding a blackened picture frame, his whole body shaking. "I knew," he said without turning around. "I knew Ashford wanted her. I knew he was furious when she chose me. But I thought—" His voice cracked. "I thought he was just a spoiled lord nursing a wounded pride. I never imagined— Rowan, he killed her." The words came out raw, broken. "He locked her in this room and burned her alive because she rejected him. And I've spent 5 years thinking it was my fault." He hurled the frame against the wall. It exploded into fragments. Lila moved closer carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. "We don't have proof yet. Gordon said Ashford argued with Charlotte that night, that he went toward this wing right before the fire started. That's enough." "It's not enough for the law." "Then damn the law." Rowan spun to face her, and his eyes were wild. "He murdered the woman I was going to marry and watched me destroy myself over it. He's probably been laughing about it for 5 years while I locked myself in this tomb." "Which is exactly why we need to be smart about this," Lila said firmly. "Ashford is powerful. He has allies, money, influence. If we go after him without solid evidence, he'll destroy us." "Let him try." "Rowan, listen to me." "No, you listen." He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping inches from her. "You're the one who pushed for this. You're the one who wouldn't let it go. You wanted the truth? Well, here it is. And now you want me to be careful, to be smart?" "I want you to survive," Lila shot back. "Because going after a man like Ashford in a blind rage will get you killed. And then what? He wins. Charlotte's death goes unavenged, and you die for nothing." The words hung in the air between them. Rowan's breathing was harsh, ragged. "What do you suggest?" We gather evidence, real evidence, letters, witnesses, anything that proves Ashford was involved. Then we go to the authorities. The authorities won't touch him. Then we go to the king. Rowan laughed bitterly. The king doesn't care about one dead woman, especially not one who died 5 years ago. He'll care about a lord who commits murder and gets away with it. He'll care about justice. You have a lot of faith in a system that's never worked for anyone without power. No, Lila said. I have faith in you. In us. If we're smart, if we plan this right, we can take Ashford down without destroying ourselves in the process. Rowan stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly the rage in his eyes dimmed to something else, something that looked almost like hope. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. Why do you care so much about a woman you never met, a crime that happened before you even knew I existed? Lila thought about lying, about giving him the easy answer, but she was tired of easy answers. Because you're not the only one who's tired of being blamed for things that aren't your fault, she said. Because I spent my whole life watching people get away with cruelty while the victims got buried, and because... She hesitated, then forced herself to continue. Because you're my husband. And maybe that started as a transaction, but right now, in this moment, I refuse to let you face this alone. Something shifted in Rowan's face. The walls he'd built so carefully, the distance he'd maintained, it cracked just a little. You're insane, he said, but there was no heat in it. You've mentioned that before. I'm serious. Going after Ashford, it's dangerous. He's already threatened you once through your sister. If we push this, he'll do worse. Then we push carefully. Rowan studied her face for a long moment. Then he set down his lamp and held out his hand. Partners? Lila looked at his outstretched hand, scarred, shaking slightly, offered without pretense or walls. She took it. Partners. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. And for the first time since she'd arrived at Blackmore Manor, Lila felt like she wasn't invisible. They spent the next 3 days searching Charlotte's rooms. It was grim work. Everything smelled like smoke and grief, and every drawer they opened, every letter they read, felt like violating a grave. But they kept going, methodical and thorough, looking for anything that might connect Ashford to the fire. What they found was worse than murder. They found obsession. Letters from Ashford to Charlotte, dozens of them, each one more desperate than the last. Declarations of love that turned to demands, promises that turned to threats. The final letter, dated the day of the fire, was barely coherent, a rambling screed about how if he couldn't have her, no one would. This is it, Lila breathed, holding the letter up to the light. This proves he had motive. It proves he was unstable, Rowan corrected, but not that he set the fire. Then we keep looking. They found more. A bracelet Charlotte had returned to Ashford, discovered hidden in a drawer with a note. I've asked you to stop. Please respect my decision. A journal entry from 2 weeks before the fire where Charlotte wrote about feeling watched, about seeing Ashford's carriage outside the manor at odd hours. And finally, tucked into the back of a book on Charlotte's nightstand, they found a handkerchief, monogrammed with Ashford's initials, reeking of lamp oil. Rowan held it up with shaking hands. The accelerant. He used lamp oil to start the fire, and he left this behind. Why would he keep it in her room? He probably didn't mean to, probably dropped it in his rush to get out before the flames spread. Lila felt sick. We have him. Letters, threats, physical evidence. The sound of hooves on gravel cut her off. They both froze. Rowan moved to the window and looked out, his face going pale. No. What? Who is it? Everyone. He stepped back from the window. Your family. Ashford. Half the nobility from the capital. It looks like a damn parade. Lila's blood turned to ice. She rushed to the window and looked down. 6 carriages sat in the circular drive, each one bearing a noble crest. Servants were already unloading trunks. And standing at the front of it all, looking up at the manor with a triumphant smile, was Delphine. What are they doing here? Lila whispered. I don't know, but we need to hide this evidence, now. They gathered everything, letters, journal, handkerchief, and Rowan locked them in a metal box he pulled from under Charlotte's bed. Then they closed the door to the wing and threw the bolts back into place. By the time they reached the entrance hall, someone was already pounding on the front door. Rowan opened it. Standing on the steps was Lila's father, looking even more pompous than she remembered. Behind him stood Delphine, her mother, and a collection of lords and ladies Lila didn't recognize. And in the back, leaning against his carriage with a predatory smile, stood Lord Quinton Ashford. He was younger than Lila expected, maybe 35, handsome in a cold way, with dark hair and eyes like chips of ice. He watched Rowan with the expression of a cat playing with a mouse. "Duke Blackmore," Lila's father said, his voice booming. "We've come to pay our respects to the new Duchess. I hope we're not intruding." Rowan's jaw tightened. "This is unexpected." "Oh, but we simply had to see how dear Lila was settling in," Delphine said sweetly. "After all, family is so important." "We weren't informed of any visit," Rowan said flatly. "A surprise, then." Lila's father pushed past him into the entrance hall, the others following. "My goodness, this place is even more dismal than I remembered. Lila, you poor thing." Lila felt Rowan tense beside her. She stepped forward before he could say something they'd both regret. "Father, Delphine, this is quite a surprise." "We've brought guests," her mother announced, gesturing to the nobles crowding into the hall. "Lord and Lady Pemberton, the Viscountess de Vere, and of course Lord Ashford, such a dear friend to our family." Ashford stepped forward, his smile never wavering. "Duke Blackmore, it's been far too long." "Has it?" Rowan said, his voice like ice. 5 years, I believe. "Not since—" Ashford trailed off delicately. "Well, the tragedy." The word hung in the air like poison. "What do you want, Ashford?" Rowan asked. "Just to pay my respects, and perhaps discuss some business. I've made several offers for your western lands over the years, but you've never responded. I thought a face-to-face conversation might be more productive." "The lands aren't for sale." "Everything's for sale at the right price." Ashford's eyes flickered to Lila. "Even things we thought were priceless." The threat was unmistakable. Before Rowan could respond, Delphine clapped her hands together. "Well, since we're all here, we simply must stay for dinner. A proper celebration of Lila's marriage. We've brought food, wine, musicians, everything needed for a party." "We're not hosting a party," Lila said. "Nonsense. You're the Duchess of Blackmore now. It's time to start acting like it." Delphine turned to the assembled nobles. "Shall we get settled? I'm sure the Duke has prepared rooms for us." "We haven't—" Rowan started. "Then we'll make do," Delphine interrupted. "Come along, everyone. Let's explore this charming manor." Before either Lila or Rowan could stop them, the nobles scattered through the house like locusts, exclaiming over the decay, the darkness, the absolute state of the place. Lila's father pulled Rowan aside. "A word, Duke?" Rowan looked like he wanted to refuse, but propriety won out. He followed Lila's father toward the study, leaving Lila alone in the entrance hall, alone except for Ashford. He approached slowly, his smile sharp as a blade. "Duchess, you look well." "What are you doing here?" Lila asked. "I told you, paying my respects." "You're here because I asked questions about Charlotte." Ashford's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. "I heard you went to the village, spoke to old Gordon, stirred up ancient history that should have stayed buried." "Murder isn't ancient history." "Careful, Duchess." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Accusations like that could ruin a woman's reputation, especially one as fragile as yours." "Is that a threat?" "It's friendly advice. You're new to society, new to your position. You don't understand how things work, but I can teach you." His eyes raked over her. "For instance, I can teach you that some doors should stay locked. Some questions shouldn't be asked, and some women should know their place." Lila's hands clenched into fists. "And what is my place, Lord Ashford?" "Silent, obedient, invisible." He leaned in close enough that she could smell the wine on his breath. "Just like you were at Hart Manor. Just like you'll be here. Once I'm done with your husband." "What does that mean?" "It means the Duke owes considerable debts. Debts that are coming due very soon. And when he can't pay them, and he won't be able to, I'll be there to buy his lands at a fraction of their value. Then this manor, these estates, everything will be mine. Just like it should have been 5 years ago if Charlotte hadn't been so stubborn." The admission hung between them. "You killed her," Lila whispered. Ashford smiled. "Prove it." Then he walked away, leaving Lila shaking with rage and fear. The dinner that night was a nightmare. Delphine had transformed the dining room with ruthless efficiency. Candles everywhere, flowers from the overgrown gardens, a feast laid out on the dusty table. The nobles sat in their finery, eating and drinking and talking as if they belonged there. Rowan sat at the head of the table, silent and tense. Lila sat at the other end, trapped between her mother and the Viscountess de Vere, and Ashford sat in the middle, holding court like a king. "To the Duke and Duchess," Delphine said, raising her glass. "May their marriage be blessed with the happiness they both deserve." The words dripped with poison. Everyone drank. "Tell me, Duke," Lord Pemberton said, "is it true you haven't left this manor in 5 years?" "It's true," Rowan said flatly. "How dedicated. Though I must say the place could use some work. Have you considered selling? There's been talk that you might be open to offers." "There's been talk," Rowan agreed, "but no truth to it." "Pity. Lord Ashford has been quite generous with his offers." "I understand." Ashford smiled. "I simply appreciate history. This manor has such a rich past. It would be a shame to see it fall into further ruin." "It's not in ruin," Lila said sharply. All eyes turned to her. Her mother frowned. "Lila." "It's not," Lila repeated. "It's been neglected, yes, but it's solid, strong, worth preserving." "How quaint," Delphine said. "You've been here 3 weeks, and you're already an expert on architecture." "I don't need to be an expert to see value where others see decay." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Delphine's smile was vicious. "That there's value in being the spare daughter, married off to a man who doesn't want you, living in a tomb?" The table went silent. Lila felt every eye on her, waiting to see if she'd break. Instead, she stood. "Excuse me," she said calmly. "I need some air." She walked out before anyone could stop her, her head high, her hands steady. But once she reached the corridor, she started running. She didn't know where she was going, just away, anywhere, somewhere she could breathe. She ended up in the ballroom, that massive empty space with the covered chandeliers and dust-thick floor. And that's where Rowan found her, standing in the center of the room, shaking. "Don't," she said when he approached. "Don't tell me to ignore them. Don't tell me it doesn't matter. Don't—" "I was going to tell you that you're right," Rowan interrupted. Lila stopped, looked at him. "This place isn't in ruin," he continued. "I let it decay because I thought I deserved to live in something broken. But you were right. It's solid, strong, worth preserving." He paused. "Like you." The words cracked something open inside her chest. "Rowan, they came here to humiliate us," he said. "Ashford brought your family, brought half of society, to turn our marriage into a public spectacle, to prove that we're exactly what everyone thinks we are, a madman and the girl nobody wanted. Then we proved them wrong." "How?" Lila straightened, an idea forming. "We show them exactly what kind of game Ashford's playing. Tonight, in front of everyone." "We don't have enough evidence yet." "Yes, we do. Letters, threats, the handkerchief. We have everything we need to destroy his reputation. We just need to present it right." Rowan stared at her. "You want to accuse him publicly? Here. Tonight. I want to expose him for what he is. A murderer who's been hiding behind his status for 5 years. And I want to do it in front of everyone who thinks we're weak. Lila, if this goes wrong, it won't. If it does, he'll destroy us. Your family will disown you. Society will turn against us completely. We'll have nothing." Lila stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "We already have nothing, Rowan. Nothing but each other and the truth. So let's use it." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then, slowly, he smiled. Really smiled, for the first time since she'd met him. "You're absolutely insane," he said. "And you're going to help me anyway." "Yes," Rowan said. "I am." They returned to the dining room together. Everyone was still there, drinking wine, laughing, treating the manor like their personal entertainment. Ashford saw them enter and raised his glass. "The Duke and Duchess return. We were just discussing your hospitality." "Were you?" Rowan said. "How convenient. Because I have something to discuss as well." The room fell quiet. Rowan moved to the head of the table, his presence commanding. 5 years ago, there was a fire in this manor. My fiancée, Charlotte, died in that fire. The authorities ruled it an accident. I believed them. I spent 5 years drowning in guilt, convinced her death was my fault. Ashford's smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold. But my wife, Rowan continued, looking at Lila, she asked questions. She refused to accept the easy answer, and what she found, what we found, changes everything. He pulled out the metal box and set it on the table. Charlotte's death wasn't an accident. It was murder. Gasps erupted around the room. That's a serious accusation, Duke, Lord Pemberton said. It's a serious crime. Rowan opened the box and pulled out the letters. These are correspondence between Charlotte and Lord Ashford. Dozens of letters where he professes his love, then his anger, then his threats. Including this one, written the day she died. He read aloud. If I cannot have you, Charlotte, then no one will. You think you can reject me and face no consequences? You think you can choose him over me? You'll regret it, I promise you that. The room was dead silent. Ashford stood slowly, his face pale. Those letters proved nothing. I was angry, yes, heartbroken. But I didn't kill her. Then explain this. Lila pulled out the handkerchief, holding it up. Your initials. Monogrammed. Found in Charlotte's room, soaked in lamp oil. The accelerant used to start the fire. Ashford's composure cracked. That proves nothing. It proves you were in her room that night. It proves you had the means. And combined with these letters, it proves you had the motive. This is absurd. Ashford slammed his hand on the table. You're accusing me of murder based on old love letters and a lost handkerchief? The fire marshal investigated. It was an accident. The fire marshal had suspicions, Rowan said. Suspicions he couldn't prove because you had an alibi. A dozen witnesses who said you were in the gardens when the fire started. Because I was. Were you? Lila challenged. Or did you pay people to say you were? You're a powerful man, Lord Ashford, powerful enough to buy testimony, powerful enough to make an investigation go away. You have no proof of that. We have enough proof to demand a real investigation, Rowan interrupted, and we're going to get one. Tomorrow, we're taking this evidence to the king himself. Ashford's face twisted with rage. You fool, do you know what you're doing? Do you have any idea what I'll… He cut himself off, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it. The mask slipping, the fury breaking through. What will you do, Lord Ashford? Lila asked quietly. Kill us too. The question hung in the air like smoke. Ashford looked around the table, at the nobles watching him with new suspicion, at Lila's family sitting frozen, at Rowan standing tall for the first time in 5 years. Then he laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You stupid girl, he said to Lila. You have no idea what you've done, no idea what's coming. He turned and walked out, his footsteps echoing through the manor. For a moment, no one moved. Then Delphine stood, her face pale. Lila, what have you… We should all retire, Rowan said, his voice cutting through the tension. It's late, and tomorrow promises to be a very long day. One by one, the nobles filtered out, whispering among themselves. Lila's family was the last to leave. Her father stopped at the door, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. You've made a powerful enemy tonight. He was already our enemy, Lila said. Now everyone knows it. Her father shook his head and left. Only Rowan and Lila remained in the dining room, standing amid the ruins of the dinner party. That was the most reckless thing I've ever seen, Rowan said. That was the most honest thing I've ever done, Lila corrected. He crossed to her, stopping close enough that she could see the way his hands were shaking. You realize he'll retaliate, tonight, tomorrow, soon. I know. He could have us killed. I know. Then why… Because I'm tired of watching guilty people walk free, Lila interrupted. Because you've spent 5 years in hell for a crime you didn't commit. Because Charlotte deserves justice. And because… She stopped, swallowed hard. Because I refuse to be invisible anymore, not even to save my own life. Rowan stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was desperate, fierce, full of 5 years of grief and rage and hope, all tangled together. Lila kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pouring everything she couldn't say into that single moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan pressed his forehead to hers. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "we face it together." "Together," Lila agreed. The sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. They spun around just as smoke began pouring under the dining room door. Rowan grabbed her hand. "Run!" They ran toward the door, but when Rowan grabbed the handle, it was locked from the outside. "No," he breathed. "No, no, no." He slammed his shoulder against it, but the old oak held firm. Smoke filled the room faster now, thick and black. Through the windows, Lila could see flames climbing the outside walls. "The windows!" she gasped. They ran to the nearest one. Rowan grabbed a chair and swung it at the glass. It bounced off. He tried again. The glass didn't even crack. "It's reinforced," Rowan said, his voice hollow. "I had it installed after the last fire, to prevent drafts." Which meant they were trapped in a burning room with no way out. Lila looked around desperately. The smoke was getting thicker, making it hard to breathe. She could hear flames crackling on the other side of the door. And outside, through the smoke-stained windows, she saw a figure standing in the garden, Lord Ashford, watching them burn. Rowan grabbed Lila and pulled her down below the smoke line, both of them dropping to their knees on the burning floor. "The servant passages," he gasped. "Charlotte's rooms. There's a passage behind the wardrobe that connects to this wing. We're on the wrong floor. There's one here too. Has to be. These manors were all built the same way." His eyes were streaming from the smoke, but they were clear, focused. "Help me look." They crawled along the walls, hands searching desperately while the room filled with smoke and heat. Lila's lungs burned. Her eyes watered so badly she could barely see. Then her fingers found it, a seam in the paneling almost invisible. "Here!" Rowan scrambled over. Together they pushed, and the panel swung inward, revealing a narrow passage barely wide enough for one person. The air inside was clearer, untouched by smoke. "Go!" Rowan urged, shoving her forward. "Not without you. I'm right behind you. Move!" Lila crawled into the passage. It was pitch black, the walls so close she could feel them pressing against her shoulders. Behind her, she heard Rowan enter, heard him pull the panel closed just as something crashed in the dining room, the ceiling collapsing. They crawled through darkness, feeling their way forward. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes climbing, sometimes descending. Lila's dress caught on splinters, her hands scraped against rough stone. But she kept moving. After what felt like hours but was probably minutes, the passage opened into a larger space. Lila stumbled out into what looked like an old storage room, filled with forgotten furniture and dust. Rowan emerged behind her, coughing. "Where are we?" Lila asked. "East wing, ground floor." He helped her to her feet. "We need to get out of the manor, now, before Ashford realizes we survived." They made their way through the dark corridors, avoiding the main halls. Through the windows, Lila could see the west wing engulfed in flames, the fire spreading fast through the old wood, and she could see the carriages in the drive, every noble who'd come for dinner standing outside watching the manor burn, watching and doing nothing. "They think we're dead," Lila whispered. "Good. Let them think it." Rowan pulled her toward the servants' entrance at the back of the house. "We can use the woods, circle around to the stables." The door ahead of them opened. Delphine stood there, her face pale in the firelight. For a moment, no one moved. Then Delphine's eyes widened. "You're alive?" "No thanks to your friend Ashford," Rowan said coldly. "I didn't know." Delphine stopped, shook her head. "He said he just wanted to frighten you, to make you understand you couldn't threaten him. I didn't know he'd actually—" "Burn us alive?" Lila finished. "Like he did to Charlotte?" Delphine flinched. "Lila, you have to understand. Lord Ashford is a powerful man. What he wants, he gets. And he wanted you silenced. So you helped him. I brought the guests like he asked. I distracted the staff. But I didn't know he'd set the fire. I swear I didn't know." Lila stared at her sister, at the woman who'd stolen her suitor, who'd mocked her marriage, who'd delivered Ashford's threats. And she saw the truth. Delphine wasn't evil. She was just weak. "Get out of our way," Lila said. Delphine didn't move. "If you run, he'll hunt you down. You exposed him in front of everyone. He can't let you live now." Then what do you suggest? Rowan asked. That we surrender? Let him finish what he started? I suggest you disappear, tonight. I'll tell everyone you died in the fire. You can start over somewhere else, somewhere Ashford can't reach you. And let him win? Lila shook her head. No, we're not running. Then you're fools, Delphine said. Both of you. She stepped aside. Rowan grabbed Lila's hand and pulled her through the door, out into the cold night air. They ran for the tree line, staying low, using the chaos of the fire as cover. Behind them, they could hear voices shouting, people organizing bucket lines that would do nothing against flames that size. Once they reached the woods, Rowan pulled Lila behind a large oak and stopped to catch his breath. We need to get to the village, he said. Find Gordon. Get him to ride to the capital. If we can get this evidence to the king before Ashford realizes we're alive, he already knows. They both turned. Lord Ashford stepped out from behind a tree, a pistol in his hand. He looked calm, collected, like he'd been waiting for them. I knew you'd use the passages, he said. Charlotte told me about them years ago. She thought it was romantic, having secret ways to move through the house. I thought it was useful information to keep. Rowan stepped in front of Lila. You won't get away with this. Won't I? A tragic fire kills the mad Duke and his unfortunate wife. The same kind of accident that killed poor Charlotte. How poetic. Ashford raised the pistol, aiming it at Rowan's chest. Everyone saw you accuse me tonight. Everyone saw you making wild claims about murder. When they find your bodies in the ashes, they'll assume you were unstable, delusional, that you probably started the fire yourselves. You're insane, Lila said. No, I'm practical. Ashford's finger moved to the trigger. Charlotte was supposed to be mine. This manor was supposed to be mine. Everything you have should have been mine. And now... The gunshot cracked through the night. Lila screamed, but Rowan didn't fall. Instead, Ashford staggered backward, a red stain spreading across his shoulder. Lord Pemberton stepped out from the trees, a smoking pistol in his hand. That's quite enough, Ashford, he said calmly. Behind him came the Viscountess de Vere, Lady Hart, and half a dozen other nobles, all looking grim. Ashford pressed his hand to his shoulder, his face twisted with rage and pain. What are you... We followed you, Pemberton interrupted. After that display at dinner, after the fire started so conveniently, we had questions. So we followed you into the woods to see what you'd do. He looked at Rowan and Lila. And we heard everything, the confession, the threats, all of it. The Viscountess stepped forward, her expression cold. You murdered Charlotte Whitmore. You tried to murder the Duke and Duchess. And you just confessed to all of it in front of a dozen witnesses. Ashford's face went white. You can't. We can, Pemberton said. And we will. Consider yourself under citizen's arrest, Lord Ashford. We'll be escorting you to the capital to face the king's justice. Two of the lords grabbed Ashford's arms, ignoring his protests. Lila's mother approached slowly, her face unreadable. Lila, are you hurt? No, Lila stopped, confused. You helped. You're my daughter, her mother said quietly. I may not have been a good mother. I may have failed you in countless ways, but I will not stand by and watch you burn. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even close to enough. But it was something. Delphine appeared from the direction of the manor, her face streaked with tears. The fire's spreading to the east wing. If we don't stop it soon, the whole manor will be lost. Rowan looked back at his home, at the flames climbing the walls, at the smoke billowing into the sky. Let it burn, he said. Everyone stared at him. This house has been a tomb for 5 years, Rowan continued, a monument to guilt and grief. Maybe it's time to let it go. Rowan, Lila started, I'm serious. He turned to face her, taking both her hands. That manor isn't our home. It's Charlotte's grave, and I'm done living in a grave. Lila looked into his eyes and saw something she'd never seen before. Freedom. What will you do? Pemberton asked. Rebuild, Rowan said simply. Somewhere else. Somewhere without ghosts. He looked at the assembled nobles. But first we finish this. We take Ashford to the capital. We get justice for Charlotte. And we make sure everyone knows the truth. Pemberton nodded. We ride at dawn. The group moved back toward the carriages, Ashford under guard, the fire still raging behind them. But Lila hung back, pulling Rowan to a stop. Are you sure about this? She asked. That manor is your family's legacy. My family's legacy is ash and stone, Rowan interrupted. You are my future, Lila, not that house, not the past. You. The words hit her like a physical force. I don't understand, she whispered. 3 weeks ago, you wanted a silent wife, a transaction, nothing real. 3 weeks ago, I was half dead. Rowan cupped her face in his hands. But you wouldn't let me stay that way. You pushed and challenged and refused to let me hide. You saw me, Lila, not the broken duke, not the man drowning in guilt. Me. Tears burned in Lila's eyes. I'm not special. I'm just the spare daughter who wouldn't shut up. You're the woman who walked into fire for me. Rowan's thumb brushed away her tears. You're the woman who faced down a murderer because you believed in truth. You're the woman who saved my life, my soul, my entire damn world. So don't tell me you're not special. Lila kissed him then, fierce and desperate, pouring 5 years of invisibility and 3 weeks of revolution into that single moment. When they broke apart, the manor was still burning behind them. But for the first time, it looked like a beginning instead of an end. They reached the capital in 2 days. The journey was grueling, 6 carriages traveling fast through rough country, Ashford under constant guard, everyone jumpy and on edge. They stopped only to change horses and grab a few hours of sleep. Lila rode with Rowan, the metal box of evidence between them. What if the king doesn't believe us? She asked on the second night, watching the stars through the carriage window. He will. We have letters, physical evidence, and a confession witnessed by half the nobility. That's more than enough. What if Ashford's allies protect him? Then we fight harder. Rowan took her hand. I spent 5 years giving up. I'm not doing it again. They arrived at the palace just after dawn on the 3rd day. The king's steward met them at the gates, his expression skeptical as Pemberton explained why they'd come. This is highly irregular, the steward said. The king doesn't hear cases without proper filing, without— Tell His Majesty that we have evidence of a lord committing murder and covering it up for 5 years, Rowan interrupted. Tell him we have witnesses, tell him we have a confession, and tell him that if he doesn't hear us, we'll take this to every newspaper in the kingdom. The steward's eyes widened. You dare threaten. It's not a threat, it's a promise. The steward disappeared inside. They waited in the courtyard for 2 hours before he returned. His Majesty will see you, he said stiffly. The Duke, the Duchess, and Lord Pemberton only. The rest of you will wait here. Ashford struggled against his guards. This is absurd. I demand— You're in no position to demand anything, Pemberton said coldly. They were led through marble corridors and past golden doors, everything gleaming with wealth and power. Lila had never been in the palace before. She felt small, out of place, like a girl playing dress-up in clothes that didn't fit. But then Rowan squeezed her hand and she remembered. She'd faced fire and murder and a man who wanted her dead. A king was nothing compared to that. The throne room was massive, vaulted ceilings painted with angels, walls lined with portraits of past monarchs, and at the center a throne of carved oak where King Edward III sat watching them approach. He was younger than Lila expected, maybe 50, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. Duke Blackmore, the king said, it's been years since you've graced us with your presence. Your Majesty, Rowan bowed. I apologize for the informality of this visit. Lord Pemberton tells me you've brought accusations of murder, against Lord Quinton Ashford no less. The king's eyes moved to Lila. And you must be the Duchess who's caused such a stir. Lila curtsied, her heart pounding. Tell me everything, the king said, and do not waste my time with dramatics. So they did. Rowan explained the original fire, his 5 years of guilt, the marriage that was supposed to be a transaction. Lila explained her questions, the investigation, what they'd found in Charlotte's rooms. Pemberton described the dinner party, the public accusation, the second fire. And finally, Rowan opened the metal box and laid out the evidence. Letters, journal entries, the handkerchief. The king read everything in silence, his face unreadable. When he finished, he looked up. Where is Ashford now? Under guard in the courtyard, Your Majesty, Pemberton said. Bring him in. Ashford was dragged before the throne, his shoulder bandaged, his face pale but defiant. Lord Ashford, the king said, You've been accused of murdering Charlotte Whitmore 5 years ago. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Majesty. This is a conspiracy. I'm not finished. The king's voice cut like a blade. You've also been accused of attempting to murder the Duke and Duchess of Blackmore, and I'm told there are witnesses who heard you confess to both crimes. Ashford's composure cracked. Those witnesses are biased. Are you calling Lord Pemberton a liar? Silence. The king leaned forward. I've known you since you were a boy, Quentin, known your family, and I've always thought you were a spoiled, entitled fool. But I never took you for a murderer. He gestured to the evidence on the table beside him. This says otherwise. Those letters prove nothing, Ashford said desperately. I loved Charlotte. Yes, I was angry when she chose him over me, but I didn't kill her. Then explain the handkerchief, the one monogrammed with your initials soaked in lamp oil found in her rooms. I don't know how it got there. Don't lie to me, the king's voice thundered through the hall. I have a dozen witnesses who heard you confess. I have physical evidence linking you to the crime. I have motive, means, and opportunity. What I don't have is patience for your denials. Ashford's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees, shaking. She was supposed to love me, he whispered. We were perfect together. Everyone said so, but she chose him, a broken, brooding fool who didn't even appreciate her. It wasn't fair. So you killed her, the king said flatly. I just wanted to scare her, to show her what she was giving up by rejecting me. But the fire spread so fast and the door was locked and… He looked up, tears streaming down his face. It was an accident. I didn't mean for her to die. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Lila felt Rowan's hand tighten around hers, felt his whole body trembling. The king stood, his face carved from stone. Lord Quentin Ashford, I hereby strip you of your title, your lands, and your freedom. You will be imprisoned for the murder of Charlotte Whitmore and the attempted murder of the Duke and Duchess of Blackmore. Your family will be investigated for any involvement in covering up your crimes, and your name will be struck from the rolls of nobility. Ashford didn't fight as the guards hauled him away. He just kept whispering, It was an accident. It was an accident. When the doors closed behind him, the king turned to Rowan. I owe you an apology, Duke. The original investigation failed you. We failed Charlotte. That will not happen again. Thank you, Your Majesty, Rowan said, his voice rough. The king's expression softened slightly. You've been locked away for 5 years, torturing yourself over a crime you didn't commit. What will you do now? Rowan looked at Lila. Rebuild. Start over. Live. A worthy goal. The king smiled faintly. And you, Duchess? What will you do? Lila thought about the girl she'd been 3 weeks ago. Invisible, forgettable, the spare daughter nobody wanted. And she thought about the woman she'd become. The one who refused to stay silent, who walked into fire, who changed everything. I'll stand beside him, she said, and make sure neither of us disappears again. The king nodded. Then I wish you both the best. You've earned it. They left the palace together, walking out into the bright morning sun. In the courtyard, the other nobles waited. Lila's family, the witnesses, everyone who'd helped bring Ashford to justice. Delphine approached first, her face uncertain. Lila, Don't, Lila said. I don't want your apologies. I don't want your excuses. I just want you to leave me alone. Delphine flinched but nodded. I understand. Lila's mother stepped forward. Where will you go? I don't know yet, Lila admitted. Somewhere new, somewhere that's ours. Her mother studied her face for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled, a small, sad thing. You look different. Stronger. I am stronger. Good. Her mother turned away. You'll need to be. The Hart family climbed into their carriage and left without another word. Lila watched them go and felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, just release. Pemberton approached, extending his hand to Rowan. If you need anything, letters of recommendation, financial assistance, you have my support. Thank you, Rowan said. That means more than you know. One by one, the nobles departed, until only Rowan and Lila remained in the courtyard. What now? Lila asked. Rowan pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Now we find an architect, buy some land, build a house that's actually ours. Not a manor? Maybe just a cottage, he smiled. Somewhere small, somewhere bright, somewhere that doesn't have any ghosts. Lila leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. They'd lost a manor, exposed a murderer, survived fire twice, and gained something neither of them expected, each other. I love you, Rowan said quietly. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But after everything we've been through, I love you too, Lila interrupted. And you're wrong. We know each other better than most people who've been married for decades. We've seen each other at our worst, our most broken, our most afraid. And we're still standing. We're still standing. They left the capital that afternoon, just the two of them in a hired carriage, heading north toward a future they'd build together. The manor was gone. The past was buried. The ghosts were finally laid to rest. And for the first time in 5 years, Rowan Blackmore stopped looking back. For the first time in 23 years, Lila Hart stopped being invisible. They were free. They were free. The words echoed in Lila's mind as the carriage rolled north, leaving the capital behind. She watched the city fade into countryside, stone buildings giving way to rolling hills, cobblestone streets becoming dirt roads. Rowan sat beside her, his hand wrapped around hers, staring out the opposite window. Neither of them had spoken since they left the palace. Finally, Lila broke the silence. Where are we going? Anywhere, Rowan said. Everywhere. Nowhere. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were lighter than she'd ever seen them. I don't know, and for the first time in 5 years, I don't care. We need a plan eventually. Eventually. He pulled her closer. But not today. Today we just exist. So they did. They spent that night in a small inn on the outskirts of a town Lila didn't catch the name of. The room was simple. Clean sheets, a wash basin, a window overlooking fields of wheat, nothing fancy, nothing grand. It was perfect. Rowan fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from days of travel and confrontation. But Lila lay awake, listening to him breathe, watching moonlight paint shadows across his face. He looked younger in sleep, peaceful, like the weight he'd been carrying had finally been lifted. And maybe it had. Ashford was in prison. Charlotte had justice. The guilt that had haunted Rowan for 5 years was gone. But what came next? Lila had spent her entire life being told who she was. The spare daughter, the disappointment, the girl who existed only to make others look better. Then she'd spent 3 weeks being the Mad Duke's silent wife, the troublemaker who asked too many questions. Now she was... what? A duchess without a manor? A woman without a family? A wife in a marriage that had started as a transaction but had become something neither of them planned for? She didn't know. And maybe that was the point. Maybe freedom meant not knowing, meant choosing who you wanted to be instead of accepting who everyone said you were. Lila smiled in the darkness and closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, she fell asleep without worrying about tomorrow. They woke to rain. Not the angry kind that had marked Lila's arrival at Blackmore Manor, but soft and steady, the kind that washed everything clean. Rowan stirred beside her, blinking awake. Good morning. Good morning. They lay there for a moment, just looking at each other. Then Rowan leaned in and kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Lila laughed. We should probably get up. Should we? Unless you plan to spend the rest of your life in bed. I'm considering it. But he sat up, stretching. Though I suppose we should eat, and find an architect, and buy land, and rebuild our entire lives. Is that all? Rowan grinned, a real genuine grin that transformed his whole face. When you put it like that, it sounds almost manageable. They dressed and went downstairs to the inn's common room, where breakfast was being served. Fresh bread, cheese, eggs, and strong tea. The innkeeper, a round woman with kind eyes, brought them their food and lingered. Begging your pardon, but aren't you the Duke and Duchess of Blackmore? Lila tensed, but Rowan just nodded. We are. Thought I recognized you from the papers. They're saying you exposed Lord Ashford for murder, that he killed his fiancée and tried to kill you too.
That's true. The innkeeper's face split into a wide smile. Well, good on you. That Ashford was always a nasty piece of work. Used to come through here years back, treating everyone like dirt beneath his boots. Nice to see him get what's coming. She bustled away, and Lila exhaled. That went better than expected. People like justice, Rowan said. They just don't always have the power to demand it themselves. But when someone does it for them, he shrugged. They remember. Is that what we did? Demand justice for everyone? No, we demanded it for Charlotte, for ourselves. The fact that it helped others is just a bonus.
They finished breakfast and set out into the rain, looking for an architect. The town had one, a middle-aged man named Thomas Whitley who worked out of a small office above the baker's shop. He was skeptical at first until Rowan explained what they wanted. "You're serious," Whitley said, looking between them. "You want to build a new house from scratch, not renovate an existing property, not restore your manor, build something completely new." "That's right," Rowan confirmed. "Why?" It was a simple question, but it hung in the air like a challenge. Rowan glanced at Lila, and she nodded. "Go ahead. Tell him." "Because the old manor was built on grief," Rowan said quietly. "On tradition and obligation and things that happened before I was born. I don't want to live in someone else's legacy anymore. I want to build something that's mine, ours." Whitley studied them both for a long moment. Then he pulled out paper and a pencil. "Tell me what you want." They talked for hours. Lila had never thought about what she wanted in a home. She'd always assumed she'd live wherever her family placed her, in whatever space they deemed appropriate for the spare daughter. But now, sitting in this cramped office with rain drumming against the windows, she discovered she had opinions. She wanted windows. Lots of them. Big ones that let in light and air and didn't make the rooms feel like tombs. She wanted a library with shelves from floor to ceiling, filled with books she chose, not dusty volumes no one read. She wanted a kitchen she could actually use, not some distant room she never saw. She wanted gardens, wild ones, like the ones at Blackmore Manor before they'd been neglected, but intentional this time. Planned, loved. And Rowan wanted music, a piano that was tuned, a room where sound could echo without feeling empty. He wanted space to breathe, high ceilings, open halls, none of the dark corridors and locked doors that had turned his family home into a prison. He wanted a future. Whitley sketched as they talked, his pencil flying across the page. When he finally turned the drawing around, both Lila and Rowan fell silent. It was perfect. Not a manor exactly, more like a large cottage, 2 stories, stone and wood, with tall windows and a wraparound porch. Gardens on 3 sides, a separate building for the stables. Room to grow, but not so much space that it felt empty. "It's beautiful," Lila whispered. "It's expensive," Whitley warned. "Stone doesn't come cheap, and neither does good craftsmanship. You're looking at 18 months of construction, minimum, maybe 2 years. Rowan pulled out his ledger. "I have funds, some from my own estates, some from investments Charlotte made before she died. She was smart with money, left me enough to rebuild 3 times over if I wanted." "Then you can afford this." Whitley named a price. It was staggering, but Rowan didn't even blink. "Done. When can you start?" "I need to see the land first. Where are you planning to build?" Rowan and Lila looked at each other. "We don't know yet," Lila admitted. Whitley laughed. "Well, that's the first step then, isn't it? Find your land, then come back, and we'll make this real." They left the office with the sketch folded carefully in Rowan's pocket. "How do we find land?" Lila asked as they walked through the rain. "We look. We explore. We find somewhere that feels right." "That's very poetic and completely impractical." Rowan grinned. "Welcome to freedom, Duchess. It's terrifying and wonderful and absolutely impractical." So they looked. They spent the next 2 weeks traveling through the countryside, visiting farms and valleys and hillsides. They saw land that was too remote, too expensive, too developed. They saw beautiful places that felt wrong and ordinary places that felt worse. And then, on a gray afternoon in late autumn, they crested a hill and found it. The valley below was perfect, a river running through the center, forests on the eastern slope, open meadow on the west. Hills protected it from the worst weather, but it wasn't isolated. A village sat an hour's walk to the south, Close enough for supplies, but far enough for privacy. This, Rowan said. This, Lila agreed. They bought the land the next day, 20 acres of valley, forest, and river. The deed was signed, the money transferred, and suddenly they owned something that was entirely theirs. No family history, no ghosts, no guilt, just possibility. Whitley came to survey the land and approved the location. Good drainage, solid bedrock, plenty of space. We can start foundation work in the spring. Spring, Lila repeated. That's months away. Building takes time, Duchess. You can't rush good work. So they waited. They rented a cottage in the nearby village, a tiny place with 2 rooms and a leaky roof, nothing like what a duke and duchess should inhabit. Lila loved it. They spent the winter planning, dreaming, arguing over details. Rowan wanted dark wood floors. Lila wanted light. She wanted blue curtains. He wanted green. They compromised, negotiated, laughed over decisions that 6 months ago would have seemed impossible. And slowly, the house began to take shape, not just in drawings, but in their minds, their future, their home, their life. But not everything was perfect. The first letter arrived in January. Lila recognized her father's handwriting and almost threw it in the fire unread. But Rowan stopped her. You should read it. You'll always wonder if you don't. So she opened it. Lila, your mother tells me I should write to you. She says I owe you an apology for how we treated you, for selling you to the Duke, for years of neglect. She's probably right, but I've never been good with apologies. What I can tell you is this. You were right about Delphine. She's been miserable since Lord Ashton broke off their engagement. Turns out he only wanted her because she was beautiful and well-connected. And when her sister became infamous for exposing a murderer, suddenly that connection wasn't so valuable anymore. She's home now, unwed, unhappy, and finally understanding what you lived with for 23 years. I don't know if that gives you any satisfaction. I hope it doesn't. Vindictiveness doesn't suit you. Your mother also wanted me to tell you that the house feels empty without you. I told her that was ridiculous, since you were barely noticed when you lived here. She hit me with a book. Maybe she was right about the apology after all. Your father, Lila, read the letter twice, then handed it to Rowan. He's trying, Rowan said after reading it. He's failing. But he's trying. That's more than most fathers would do. Lila thought about that. About her father, who'd sold her without hesitation, but was now writing awkward letters trying to bridge a gap he'd created. About Delphine, who'd lost everything she'd taken for granted. About her mother, hitting her father with a book because he couldn't apologize properly. It should have felt like victory, like justice, like everything she'd wanted. Instead, it just felt sad. Do you want to write back? Rowan asked. I don't know. Lila folded the letter carefully. Maybe someday, but not today. More letters came over the winter, from Lord Pemberton, checking on their progress, from the Viscountess de Vere, inviting them to her spring gala, from nobles who'd witnessed Ashford's downfall and wanted to align themselves with the Duke and Duchess who'd exposed him. Rowan answered some, ignored others. Society will want us back eventually, he said one evening, sitting by the fire in their tiny cottage. They'll want to parade us around as examples of justice and bravery and whatever else makes for good gossip. Do we have to go back? Lila asked. Not if we don't want to. What do you want? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. I want to finish the house. I want to live in it with you. I want to wake up every morning without nightmares. He stopped, swallowed hard. I want to be happy. Is that allowed? Lila crossed to him, knelt between his knees, took his face in her hands. It's absolutely allowed. I spent 5 years thinking I didn't deserve happiness, that wanting it was selfish, wrong, a betrayal of Charlotte's memory. And now? Now I think Charlotte would want me to live, to move forward, to build something good from the ashes. He pulled Lila into his lap. And I think she'd like you. You think? I know. She always said I needed someone who'd challenge me, who wouldn't let me disappear into my own head. Someone strong enough to stand beside me, not behind me. He smiled. She'd approve. Lila rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I wish I could have met her. Me too. I think you two would have been friends. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in firelight and each other, while outside snow began to fall. Spring came with mud and chaos. Construction started in March, crews of workers descending on their valley, digging foundations, hauling stone, building walls that grew taller each day. Lila and Rowan were there constantly, watching their dream take shape. The first floor went up in April, the second floor in May. By June, the roof was on, and the house actually looked like a house instead of a skeleton. Whitley walked through with them, pointing out details. The windows here will face east, so you'll get morning light in the breakfast room. The library's on the north side, cooler for the books. And the music room has acoustics that'll make that piano sing. It's perfect, Lila said for the 100th time. It's not finished yet. We still need floors, walls, trim, all the finishing work. But yes, it's going to be perfect. They moved in that autumn, even though half the rooms weren't done. The furniture was sparse, pieces they'd bought from village craftsmen, simple and sturdy. The walls were bare. The gardens were still being planted. But it was theirs. On their first night in the new house, Rowan carried Lila over the threshold like a proper bride. She laughed, protesting, but he didn't put her down until they reached the bedroom. "Welcome home, Duchess," he said. Lila looked around the room, at the big windows overlooking the valley, at the fireplace already crackling with warmth, at the bed they'd chosen together. "Home," she repeated, testing the word. It fit. That night they christened every room in the house, made love in the library, on the music room floor, against the kitchen counter, laughed and touched and claimed every inch of their new life. And when morning came, Lila woke to sunlight streaming through those big windows and Rowan's arms around her. "Good morning," he murmured against her hair. "Good morning. Any regrets?" She thought about it, about the girl she'd been, invisible, unwanted, resigned to disappearing, about the woman she'd become, fierce, unbreakable, impossible to ignore. "None," she said. The first visitor arrived in November. Mrs. Hendricks showed up with a basket of preserves and a knowing smile. "Heard you two built yourselves a proper home. Wanted to see it for myself." Lila invited her in, showed her around the finished rooms. Mrs. Hendricks inspected everything with a critical eye, nodding approval. "Better than that old tomb. This place has life in it." "It does," Lila agreed. "And you—" Mrs. Hendricks turned to study Lila's face. "You look different, happier." "I am happier." "Good. You earned it." Mrs. Hendricks set down her basket. "I also came to tell you something. The old manor's being torn down. What the fire didn't destroy, time and weather finished. The Duke's solicitor asked what should be done with the land." Rowan, who'd just entered the room, went still. "And?" "I told him to ask you. It's still your land, after all." Rowan looked at Lila. "What do you think?" "I think we should donate it," Lila said. "To the village. Let them build something useful there. A school, a hospital, something that helps people instead of holding ghosts." "A school," Rowan repeated slowly. Then he smiled. Charlotte would have loved that. She always said the world needed more teachers. "Then it's settled." He turned to Mrs. Hendricks. "Tell the solicitor the land goes to Thornwick, with one condition. They named the school after Charlotte Whitmore. So she's remembered for more than how she died." Mrs. Hendricks' eyes went suspiciously bright. "I'll tell him, and I'll make sure they do it right." She left shortly after, and Lila found Rowan standing at the music room window, staring out at the valley. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I'm letting go," he said. "Of the manor, the guilt, all of it. And it's—" He paused, searching for words. "It's terrifying and relieving all at once." Lila slipped her hand into his. "We're building something new, something better." "We are." He pulled her close. "Together." The second winter was easier than the first. The house was fully finished now, every room complete, every detail perfect. They'd hired a small staff, a cook, a housekeeper, a gardener, not because they needed the help, but because it felt right to share their good fortune. And slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild their lives in society. They attended the Viscountess de Vere's spring gala, where they were treated like conquering heroes. Lords and ladies who'd once ignored them now competed for their attention. It was exhausting and absurd and occasionally satisfying, but they didn't let it consume them. They went home to their valley, to their house, to their life. They planted gardens that grew wild and beautiful. They filled the library with books. They hosted small dinners for friends, real friends, like Lord Pemberton and his wife, like Mrs. Hendricks, like the villagers who'd helped them build their home. And on quiet evenings, Rowan played the piano while Lila read, and neither of them felt the need to be anywhere else. 1 year became 2, 2 became 3. Life settled into a rhythm, not perfect, but good. Real. And then, on a spring morning 3 years after they'd left Blackmore Manor, Lila woke feeling different. She lay in bed trying to place the sensation. Not sick exactly, just changed. Rowan stirred beside her. "You all right?" "I'm pregnant," Lila said. The words hung in the air. Rowan sat up slowly, staring at her. "What?" "I'm pregnant. I'm sure of it. I can feel it." For a moment, he didn't move. Then his face split into the widest smile she'd ever seen, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "We're having a baby," he whispered against her hair. "We are." "When? How? I mean, I know how, but—" Lila laughed. "Probably 6 months from now, maybe 7. I'll need to see a midwife to be sure." Rowan pulled back, cupping her face. "Are you happy?" "Terrified," Lila admitted. "But yes, happy." "Me too." They told no one for weeks, keeping the secret between them like a precious thing. But eventually, it became impossible to hide. Lila's body changing, her dresses no longer fitting quite right. When they finally announced it, the valley erupted in celebration. Mrs. Hendricks cried. The staff threw a party. Lord Pemberton sent an enormous basket of baby clothes and a note that said simply, "About time." And Lila's mother sent a letter, short, awkward, but sincere. "Congratulations, daughter. May your child know nothing but love." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start. Their daughter was born in October during the first frost. The birth was long and brutal, hours of pain that left Lila exhausted and wrung out. But when the midwife finally placed the baby in her arms, everything else disappeared. She was perfect, tiny, red-faced, screaming her fury at the world. "She's got your temper," Rowan said, his voice thick with tears. "And your eyes," Lila countered. They named her Charlotte, not to replace the woman who died, but to honor her, to remember that even in tragedy, new life could grow. Rowan held his daughter with shaking hands, staring at her like she was a miracle. "I never thought I'd have this," he whispered. "A family, a future. I never thought I deserved it." "You deserve it," Lila said fiercely. "We both do." Charlotte grew fast, from infant to toddler, from toddler to a little girl with dark curls and a laugh that filled the house. She was fearless, curious, impossible to contain, just like her mother. One afternoon when Charlotte was 4, Lila found her in the library, surrounded by open books. "What are you doing?" Lila asked. "Reading," Charlotte said seriously. "You can't read yet." "I'm learning," she pointed to a picture. "That's a dragon, and that's a princess, and that's—" She frowned. "I don't know that one." Lila knelt beside her daughter. "That's a phoenix, a bird that burns and comes back to life stronger than before." "Like you and Papa," Charlotte said. The observation hit Lila like a punch. "What do you mean?" "Mrs. Hendricks said you and Papa burned in a fire and came back, that you're like phoenixes." Lila smiled, pulling her daughter close. "I suppose we are." "Will I be a phoenix too?" "You can be anything you want, Charlotte. Anything at all." Charlotte thought about that, then went back to her books. And Lila watched her, this fierce little girl who'd never known what it was like to be invisible, who'd never been told she wasn't enough. This was their legacy, not a manor or a title or wealth. This, a child who knew she mattered, who knew she was loved, who knew she could burn and rise and burn again. 10 years after leaving Blackmore Manor, Lila and Rowan stood on the hill overlooking their valley. Below them, the house gleamed in afternoon sun, expanded now, with a new wing for guests and a workshop for Charlotte, who developed a passion for building things. The gardens were magnificent, wild and planned at once, full of flowers Lila had chosen and vegetables the staff tended. In the distance, smoke rose from the village, and Lila could just make out the new school, Charlotte Whitmore Academy, where children from across the region came to learn. "We did it," Rowan said quietly. "We did. Built a life, raised a daughter, survived." Lila leaned into him. "More than survived. We lived." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching their world. Then Charlotte came running up the hill, breathless and excited. "Papa, Mama, come quick! I've built something." She grabbed both their hands and dragged them down toward the workshop, chattering the whole way about gears and pulleys and a machine that would definitely work this time. Rowan caught Lila's eye and grinned, and Lila grinned back. Because this chaos, this love, this beautiful, imperfect life they'd built from ashes, this was everything. They'd started as strangers in a transaction, a broken duke and an invisible girl, both convinced they didn't deserve happiness. But they'd found each other anyway, found strength in each other, found the courage to burn down the world that tried to erase them and build something new in its place. Lila thought about the girl she'd been, the spare daughter, the one nobody saw, the one who'd accepted her invisibility as inevitable. And she thought about the woman she'd become, the one who refused to fade, who walked into fire, who changed everything. She'd survived the cruel game she was thrown into. And then she'd rewritten it completely, proving that the most dangerous person in a ruthless world isn't the one with the most power or the sharpest blade. It's the one who refuses to stay unseen, the one who stands up, speaks out, and demands to be heard, the one who burns bright enough that everyone has to look. Lila Hart, now Lila Blackmore, had spent 23 years being invisible. She'd spent the last 10 years making sure no one could ever ignore her again. And as she watched her daughter disappear into the workshop, as she felt Rowan's hand tighten around hers, as she looked out at the valley they'd built together, Lila knew she'd never fade again. She was done being the spare. She was the woman who changed everything, and this life, this love, this future spreading out before her like an open road, this was just the beginning.